Brethren, how often do we make promises? We make promises all the time, don't we? Right from our very youngest years until our very last years. We promise to pick up our toys. We promise to do well in school. We promise to pay our mortgage and pay our bills. But there are other promises at times that we don't fulfill. And there are various reasons sometimes, but it does happen. But what about God and Jesus Christ and their promises? They always keep their promises, don't they? There's no doubt about God and Jesus Christ keeping promises. And when you look at the Bible, it's filled with promises from the beginning to the very end. And as God says through Peter in 2 Peter 3:9, and I'm not going to turn to these, we've got a lot going on today, so this is going to be kind of a short message. All my messages are short anyway. Anyway, 2 Peter 3:9 says, the Lord is not slack concerning his promises. They keep their promises. And even in very difficult and trying and troubling times, the promises are there. And we have to look to those promises, and we know that very difficult times are ahead. And Jesus Christ said, if they persecute me, they will persecute you. And that persecution is coming. And I want to relate to you a story about persecution that a family went through in Germany in World War II. I was lent this book by Susie Haskell by Mrs. Luker. It's a wonderful book. It's called A Thousand Shall Fall. And it's about this family in Germany during World War II in the Nazi era and how their world was turned upside down very quickly. In 1939, Frank Haskell got a letter in the mail stating, you're invited to join the Wehrmacht, the German army. You're not only invited, you're commanded to be in the Wehrmacht. And if you don't, your days are over. So he did. He joined, and great trouble came forth for them and their family, especially the family. There was a mother, Helen, and 3 children that were left in Frankfurt while he went off to be in the German army. And he also had a great deal of trouble because, you see, the Haskell family were Sabbath keepers. I never realized it until I read this book that in Germany there were Seventh-day Adventists during World War II, and they had an extremely difficult time. And this family, even though they were Germans for generations after generation, they were looked upon as being Jew lovers of all things that the Jews do. So it was very difficult. But God was with them because they prayed continuously. They looked to God's promises in the Bible. And they particularly looked at various promises, and one of them was Deuteronomy 31:8, which Moses is talking about God. He said, he is the one who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Do not fear nor be dismayed. And well, they were fearful, but they weren't dismayed. And they kept the Sabbath. Mr. Haskell had a very difficult time in the army trying to keep the Sabbath. In fact, there were numerous times they said, this is it for you. You've disobeyed orders to do something on the Sabbath. Your day is done. This is the end for you. And each time something happened, something intervened, that it didn't happen. And he kept on keeping the Sabbath. He kept on reading his Bible. He shunned their food because there was a lot of pork involved. The only thing he ate basically was bread and butter. And he was sent to the Russian front. He wasn't right on the front. He was with an engineering battalion that made bridges and took care of the roads behind the front. But still, he was very close to the front. And as they went from town to town after the initial army went through, he tried to warn some of the people in those villages and towns, said, if there's any Jews here, flee, hide. And he never knew whether any of them ever did or not. But he took his life, he took his life in his own hands, so to speak, by doing that, even trying to warn people that the Gestapo was one day behind him, sorting out the Jews and murdering them. While all this was going on, the family in Frankfurt was struggling horribly. Very little food. They were being harassed to join the Nazi Party. They had trouble with Sabbath because of school for the children. In Germany, I don't know, maybe still be the same case now, they have Saturday school, and the children had to attend school on Saturday. And she would never send them to school on Saturday. And she was always, Helen was her name, she was always in trouble with the school and with the principals because of the children. So eventually she fled with the children to southern Germany and was there a brief while, staying with some other Seventh-day Adventist brethren, and they were told to leave. So they went back and forth. I'm going to try and cut this short. There's a whole lot of details. But they were back and forth in and out of Frankfurt 3 times, and the third time when they left, it was because her son got the same letter that her husband had got, said, "You are commanded to join the Wehrmacht today. Not tomorrow, today." And the same reprisal. Your day is done if you don't join. And so they fled once more to a town they'd been to before, but they had had to leave because of Sabbath issues also. But this time they walked, and it was 40 miles north of Frankfurt that they walked. And they had another child by then. They had 4 children, and she was pushing a baby carriage, 40 miles with a baby in the carriage. And she's the one who wrote the book. They made it after 2 days, and sleeping alongside the road in the bushes, hiding. And when they got there, the Burgermeister, or the mayor of the town, said, "We'll take you in, and nobody's going to bother you. You're safe here." And she was so thankful. She'd been praying constantly as they walked that they would be able to find safety. And they did. And she said, it was like being born up on eagle's wings. And so they stayed there until the war was ended. Meanwhile, Frank Hasel was still in the German military, and they were fleeing back out of Russia as the Russians were overrunning them. And he made it back out of Russia. And he turned himself into the Americans when he got to Germany. And they said, "Let us have your pistol. Get your pistol out of your holster." He pulled out his pistol. It was a piece of wood. He had thrown away his issued pistol, might have even been a Luger. He had thrown it away and made a pistol out of wood, and he said, "That way I'll never kill or murder anybody." And so it was an exciting and incredible story of this people's lives. It was their tribulation. It was their time of great trouble. And they looked to God, and they looked to his promises of keeping them safe. They weren't looking to God for health, wealth, and happiness. They were looking for survival. And they got it. And when Franz got back to Germany, out of 1,200 men in that battalion that went to Russia, there were only 7 left. 7 out of 1,200. And there were 4 of them that were injured. And Frank was one of only 3 that had never been injured or hurt. God had really watched over those people. And when we think back on these things and look at these things that people have gone through in the past, and we ruefully look forward to what is coming, we don't know how long. But we look to God's promises, and they are great promises. And if you look at Philippians 1:6, he who has begun a good work in you, he will complete it. It will be completed. But brethren, we can short-circuit, we can negate God's great promises of protection and help and bring on the promises of, I really don't want to say the cursings, but of punishment and correction. God's promises are there, and he keeps them. Brethren, I hope we look to God's promises and his ways. And I want to turn to Revelation 22. It's the last promise in the Bible. Jesus Christ says here, and it's a promise we all look forward to, no matter what our circumstances, what we're going through. what happens in our lives. It's Revelation 22:20, and Jesus Christ says, "Surely I am coming quickly." That is the most wonderful and awesome promise, for the world will change. And I just want to read one little snippet out of this book of why Susie Haskell wrote this book. And it's in her foreword. And she said, "It is my hope that this book will be an encouragement to God's people during the time of the end. Brethren, we have sure promises from God and Jesus Christ that Jesus Christ will return and all will be made right. So, brethren, look to God's promises. In good times and bad times, his promises are always there."